So just a really informal welcome to Mark Coles. You guys need to know who this gentleman is if you don't already, and he's had tremendous success with his clients prior to now, and has recently, put his money where his mouth is and been kicking ass on the UK bodybuilding stage. So, dude, pleasure to have you on, and can't wait to hear all about your success and your what you've recently done.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's an absolute privilege.
Yeah, man. So I first took notice of what you did. Obviously, I met you here in Tampa, and then I took notice of all your transformations online, which are, by the way, insane. So obviously, you have a tremendous knowledge base, and you know what you're doing. And then you've turned it all around and applied it on yourself. And I know you said when you were here, you were aspiring to be a bodybuilder, and you were previously a rugby player. Am I correct?
Correct,
Yeah.
100%.
So
20,
making that
20 to
shift,
22 years.
yeah, making that shift from the rugby pitch to bodybuilding is big, man. It's a big difference because it's a lot of running, playing rugby. I'm sure you're still a big, strong, muscular guy, but it's a completely different thing altogether. So tell us a little bit about your history, man. How long have you been training? Obviously with rugby as well, but how long have you been training athletes? And I want to learn a little about you because I don't know all these things.
Okay, cool. So I've always had a passion for training, but I started playing rugby when I was about 6. My dad was a coach for the local rugby team. He played representative county and rugby, so it was kind of like Dad's always been my role model and inspiration, whether it's nowadays with business or in the past with rugby. And I've kind of followed his footsteps as a little idolizing child. As I got a little bit older, I wasn't very big, and I started lifting weights. And you know, I'll tell you right now, I remember being in Q8 with a friend of mine when I was 15, with baggy muscle trousers on and a string vest, while Samir Banut was posing in the mirror, and I
Nice.
thought I was jacked. I thought I was jacked, and
Amazing.
I was one of those kids that would walk around. At home, I'd have the dumbbells. I'd read the magazines, but the funny thing has come to me really recently is I think we look at the magazines and we look at the big guys, and there's that limiting belief in you that just shuts you off from even contemplating the thought of ever being one of those guys.
Maybe, yeah.
Um, yeah, and as a kid, I went down the rugby route. Had a very traditional family that was, you know, going playing rugby was the thing. So I trained and I played, pretty good level. Represented county and Midlands, and had kind of junior national trials and Premiership. When I was 18, played junior kind of Premiership level for a short period of time. But it wasn't until I dislocated, I had reconstructive surgery on my left shoulder, fully tore my AC joint on the right shoulder, and I got to the point where rugby wasn't my passion and training was, and it crossed over when I first became a personal trainer. And early on in the personal training industry, I was kind of, you'll probably see this as a lot of personal trainers that are guided down the kind of flexibility route, the core route, the kind of the health club industry moves you down a route, and
Right.
unless you're very dogmatic in your pursuit for the area of the fitness industry that you want to be in, it's quite easy to just get taken along down that route. And so, probably for the first 4 or 5 years, I was doing functional stuff, biomechanical stuff, therapy stuff. I spent 3 years doing biomechanics, movement based stuff, and
Right.
trying to fix people through therapy. And it wasn't until I started, I do remember going to Biosignature Level 1, and Christian Thibodeau was there, and he was doing hang cleans, and I was with the dumbbells doing mobility drills, and I said to myself, dude, this dude is jacked,
Yeah.
and I'm mobilizing stuff. What I'm doing is not what's going to get me bigger.
Right.
And that was in Santander in Spain, so that was one of the probably second year Charles did it. Anyway, cut a long story short, in between that phase, um, being a drinking rugby lad to a guy that wanted to pursue his physique, he had to completely break away from everybody that he was surrounding his life with, and I had to recreate myself. Then
Yeah.
at the age of 28, I recreated Mark. I'm 37 now. Um, I followed a lot of your stuff because of your mind, actually, because of how deep you go into the ability to achieve success. And I read a lot of your stuff, and I'd read a lot of other people's stuff, and I thought, you know what? To actually be who I want to be, the person that I am right now is a million miles away from it. So I spent 3 years actually doing a lot of personal development, a lot of NLP. I hired a coach, one of the best in the country, and I still see her today. You know, I still go and see her, you know, once every couple of months. And I actually used her on a Skype call before I went on stage.
Good for you.
Um,
I
and
do that every contest, man.
and do you know what she said to me? The judges need to know you're backstage before they see you, and that's all about energy.
Yeah,
And you know what? I was so relaxed backstage, and it was the biggest thing I'd ever done. And I always had a little bit of anxiety with things that I did in the past. And I just walked out there, and people said the smile on my face was like I was in the place that I should have been a long time ago.
Right.
And I just wouldn't stop smiling. And there were guys that were just grimacing and looked like they didn't want to be there, but you know that was my time. And so you know the whole journey for me really has been wanting to be bigger, not really having the knowledge, not having the tools, and just like you've done, I've travelled the world and spent thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds learning from some of the best. And I won't relent until I've achieved what I want to achieve. And every time I get where I think I'm nearer, my goals go even higher.
That's exactly it. You'll never
So
get it right. It'll always be a
no.
perpetual quest.
Yeah, and do you know what? There was some very interesting things 6 or 7 years ago was turning up at a training camp, 85 kilos. Okay, and Charles was there.
Mm-hmm.
There were some big dudes there. Milos Sarcev was there, who we'll talk about in a second. And you know, I just blended into insignificance, and I had minerals. You know, I like to use the word minerals. I trained hard, and I gave everything that I'd got, but I was this guy with no muscle, and I went away from there, and I thought, you know what? How am I going to ever get in front of the likes of, you know, people that I aspire to learn from if they're looking at a guy that can't put muscle on?
Right.
You know, and I actually think that, you know, it's the respect thing in the industry. The more respect you can get off other people, I think the more information you probably learn from them.
Well, I tell you, man, the one thing I always say to everyone is you have to bring something to the table. You know, you can walk into a room with anyone, and you have to bring something of value to the table. It's not necessarily that you have to be as good as at something as they are, but you have to be great at one thing. You know, like I walk into a room, and whoever happens to be there, I believe I can add value to their life. I believe I can help them with something to do with training, fitness, nutrition, whatever it may be. And that allows me to hold the conversation. If I walk in a room and it's Tony Robbins, if I walk in a room it's Charles Poliquin, or if it's whomever, Obama, like the President of the United States, I can hold the conversation because I'm confident in that I'm great at something and I can add value to the conversation. Where most people walk into a room and, like, what do you have to say? There's nothing of value other than talking about social media or putting other people down, right? Which is usually why so many people focus all their energy and time on putting other people down because they have nothing of true value to add.
100%. And that's interesting what you said there, because I went to a 5-day seminar, and I want to talk about this because people actually on the call are going to wonder why people like me have transformed in the last 4 or 5 years. And this programming and this diet obviously play a huge part in it, but I recreated my brain, and I am not just more confident. I am the real authentic me because I actually created it.
Right.
And what happened to me was I did a 5-day course, which was basically exploring the possibility that everything in life could be amazing. And it was breaking down your limitations, what they called the rackets that you moan about day in, day out, waking up in the morning, having the ability to just not just be thankful for every day, but have no reason to not be happy every day. And there are a lot of people that wake up unhappy, a lot of people that are reflecting really badly on everything about their life, and they're the ones that aren't moving forward. And I thought, well, if I want to be this guy, and you know, I don't mind saying that, you know, I want to be a leader in my field. I want to be an inspirational figure at what I do, and it's not the only reason I do it, but to be able to do that, I need to be 100% bang on myself. And that's why I think a lot of people don't move forward, because they're not brave enough to explore their own limitations. And I did that, and it turned my world upside down for 6 months. And then I started the journey rebuilding who I wanted to be. And as I've got better at being who I wanted to be, my body's got better at the same time.
Of course.
And my body's improved, my mind's improved. The people around me are incredible nowadays. You know, I'm extremely privileged to be in contact with you as frequently as we do, and for you to ask me to be involved with things with you. And you know, this whole journey has kind of been created in a way, and people are coming into it at the right time. Um, and I believe all of that has played a huge part in developing my physique and my knowledge. So,
I'll tell you what,
you know,
man, you're
I put a
adding
lot of effort
value
into
to
it.
people's lives, and that's why I reached out to you. Is like you obviously have a tremendous passion, and you have something of value to bring, and that's all it's about, man. Like if in my life, I respect and appreciate anyone who has a passion for anything, no matter what you love, and you're great at it. If you have a tremendous passion for it and you're working toward it with, ruthless vigor, no matter what it is, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. And then I see someone like yourself in quote unquote my industry, while doing what I'm doing and doing an exceptional job at it and showing your tremendous passion. Like the fact that you flew over here to Tampa to see Dr. Wilson speak, and I'm like, okay, well obviously this guy's serious about learning about fitness and muscle building. And then I started following you on Facebook and saw all your stuff, and man, like you're doing a great job, and the sky's the limit for sure.
Similar, same for you as well, man.
Thanks, man.
But did you know what? Like I think the whole the industry, especially our industry, is driven by people who aren't prepared to go out their comfort zone and aren't prepared to stand in front of people and reach out like I did to you on Facebook and didn't even know you and say,
Right.
"Look, can I come and see you?"
Mm-hmm.
Because for every meeting, if you approach it right, you learn something from it. And I remember every consult I paid Charles for. I remember consulting with Mara Pasquale. I remember all these guys that I went into the call, and in the early days of doing it, I went in with very little. But as I got a little bit more knowledge, I got more out of each and every
That's right.
consult that I
Yeah.
did. And you remember me and you sat with Tampa, I had about 4 pages of notes that
Yeah.
I was rattling through. And because I wanted to make sure that there was some added value that was going to come out of meeting you, not just, hi Ben, how are you?
Right.
And I think a lot of people aren't prepared to put themselves out of the comfort zone in front of people that can add value for the fear of themselves looking
That's
bad.
exactly what it is. It's fear of being judged, right? Everybody's afraid of being judged, and unless you're self confident, you're always worrying about what people are going to think, and it's unfortunate, but it's a fact of life, you know.
And then also, like you did with me, and like trainers do when they consult with me, you know, what are the action points you're taking away from the consult that you've done? But don't just listen to the person that you're talking. Go away and put those in place. And do you
Mm-hmm.
know what? Every little key thing that I've learned from somebody, that's the reason why they're more successful than me at that particular time. So I've implemented the thing that's been the most relevant, and things have changed. And that comes down to building muscle. That comes down to people telling me to train harder or change a position of exercises or, stick to my diet or increase my calories, whatever they've done. I've done it and stuck to it, where a lot of people do it but change and chop and change, and that's why we get chop and change and stale results. So,
Right.
it's important to just make sure you take away and take action as well.
So, man, I think a lot of people want to know. I want to know about what you did for this prep, and when you started, how long you were prepping, and how many shows have you done? First of all,
I've done two.
you just did the two this year. Is the
Two,
first time you ever competed?
yeah, two this year. First time I qualified,
Wonderful.
qualified 4 weeks ago, and then did the British this year, this weekend, and came second in the what they call the intermediate over 90 category. So I weighed in dehydrated, just under 97. Um, I
Great.
think I'm about 106 today.
Yeah, to be expected, right? So, I mean,
To
I
be
saw your
expected.
pictures, and I noticed tremendous similarities in your physique to Milos. And like I said to you on Facebook, that's a compliment because I really believe he has the best physique of all time. I can see a
Thank you.
lot of his training methodologies in your physique, or at least just starting to pop through because I know you've only been training with him for a while. We'll get that in a bit. Um, how long did you train for the show, man? And when did you decide you were going to compete?
Okay, so I had a prolapse in my disc, a prolapse of disc in my back 6 years ago,
Is that's from rugby?
and well, basically what happened through biomechanics, and I know you know the body, I didn't realise how severe a ligament injury in my right ankle was, and it was causing me to heavily overpronate doing the squat.
Right.
I got internal rotation of my femur. That caused my glute to turn off, and every time I squat, I was getting pressure through my lumbar. And the heavier the load that I went, obviously the less that I was able to contract the muscles and lost stability. And then I kind of went all manly on myself one day about 6 years ago and popped L5S1. It's the most excruciating pain I've ever had in my life. But I believe that out of every problem there is a message and a gift from it. And I learned a lot about rehabbing spines. I was told by a surgeon that I would never train again, I wouldn't squat again, and I actually sent him a back squat of 150 in a YouTube video with a clip underneath saying, the next time you try and ruin somebody else's career, realize there's somebody out there that actually knows more than you about fixing injuries.
Nice.
Because I consulted with, what's the back guy from Canada, Stuart McGill. And I went. Do you know what? I started on kneeling planks, and I could do 10 seconds.
Hey, that's still.
And at that point,
it's progression.
Yeah, it's progression, right? So kneeling planks, good morning with a dowel, isometric back extensions, and I just took myself through the process. And I said to myself, right, this is your opportunity to really take a grip of what you want to do with your physique, because you've got the foundations now to build. And it was from that moment that I started to apply more bodybuilding principles to my physique. And as I got back to being able to squat and do everything normally, I knew that my legs were my weakness, right? So I then started to apply training frequency to my lower body. And my body started to grow and grow and grow. Then I was studying relentlessly more bodybuilding and one thing and another, and my physique started to change. And I literally knew. I looked in the mirror, Ben, and I said to myself, "It's not ready. It's just I had left and right shoulder imbalances. I had quad and hamstring imbalances, and I'm a perfectionist. And I thought, if I'm going on stage, this stuff has to be balanced. So I literally just set to work on carving my physique and pushing and pushing and growing and pushing and growing. And then I actually consulted and followed nearly all of John Meadows' programming in how he writes programs. I did Mario Pasquale's nutrition. I worked with a few different local people. And then interestingly, when your first program, was it MI40? First one? You talked about intra-workout carbohydrate. But you said start having it a little bit later into the workout, right? And I started racking my brain, and I was like, I was this low-carb advocate from courses I'd done in the past. And it wasn't working. And I thought, well, I'm pretty carb, insulin resistant, and in my eyes, wasn't handling carbs too well. So I started shuttling them into the workout, and I started to get more pumps. I started to have better endurance. I started to be able to train longer. I started to get heavier. Started to get stronger. And then I started playing around with them. I was having them never before, but I started them a little bit earlier on in the workout after my heavy lift. And then my physique started to grow. And then as I started to research more and, later, obviously the last 18 months, 2 years, reading a lot more of Jacob Wilson's stuff. I've been and attended a lot of Brad Schoenfeld's work, looking at the mechanisms of hypertrophy. And do you know what a lot of trainers don't do? With the stuff that they read, they don't apply it.
That's exactly right. They don't know how to apply it.
No, they don't know how to apply it. And I was reading Brad's stuff, and I was going, right, well, I actually start getting very sore if I do strength training for a block. But then I got I would then get quite weak if I would do volume for too long.
Right.
So then I started thinking, what if I started to incorporate this and do heavy lifts? Then as the workout progressed, started to hit my volume. Then it kind of teamed together where I started to read more about cell swelling, and I started to read more about lactic acid. And then I will jump forward to about a few months ago, 6 months ago, when I saw you in Tampa. But when I was sat in the back of a taxi with Jacob Wilson and Gabe Wilson, and we were all going to get some ice cream at the end of the day, I was saying to Brad, I said, look, I'm not a scientist, but my programming's bloody working. I'm actually realizing that I can't get big on heavy lifts on their own in a set phase.
Nope.
But I'm realizing that I'm growing a lot with a lot more volume in terms of 20, 30 reps, especially with my quads. They just blew up. So I was piecing together this programming, um, and my body was growing. And it was at that point that I decided to speak to a friend of mine, Jordan Peters, who's a heavyweight bodybuilder in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
and a very, very, very close friend of mine. And I said to Jordan, I need to go and see Milos. So we booked a flight, and we went and stayed with him for 3 days in Serbia.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of, it was the moment for me by going there. I thought I just about got a half decent enough physique for him to say, I think there's some potential there. But I'd also had 5 years of working my arse off, and I trained that hard. I knew if I turned up at Milos's place and didn't pull the pin, and then I asked him to prep me, that was my opportunity to prove to him.
Right.
So I'd spent 5 or 6 years carving this kind of physique. I'd had a photo shoot in February, and then middle of June, I went over to Milos, and at the end of it, I approached him and said, I think I'm ready to compete. Would you take me on? And that's when we set to work on actually presenting and creating a body that was ready for the stage.
That's amazing, man. And as we briefly talked about Milos prior to the call, but as far as being a great guy and a trainer, he's exceptional. But I think my favorite thing about Milos, other than his tremendous knowledge, which I think is greater than anyone in the hypertrophy realm, is his sincere passion to help people, man. Like, for no reason at all, did he reach out to me and help me, and he just sincerely wants to see you get better. And the thing that I love about him is he won't take no for an answer. Like, if, he literally threatened to, I brought one of my buddies down who was also, I think he's Croatian or Serbian or something like that. So him and Milos spoke the same language. And so we were doing back one day, and he said, I can't do it. And Milos goes, what? There's the fucking door. He points to the door. You don't say I can't. That's just true. And he wanted to kick him out.
He did.
Yeah, and
I think. Do you know what? I think he told me that. And do you know one of the things that he would tell me? He's told me many stories about his gym in Fullerton and how people wanted to prep with him, and he'd do half a training session, turn around to them and just say no.
Yeah, get out.
Yeah. And I the people that I have a lot of respect for, I think it's rude of me to turn up to pay Milos to train him, to not put in the work.
Give it
Do you
your
know
all.
what? Milos's methodology is, he's not called Milos the Mind for no reason.
Right.
The guy has an intense ability to accept pain and go where anybody else doesn't go. But his training protocol, which is where I think a lot of people get wrong, intra-workout nutrition, when people start ramping it up and getting fat, the reason they get fat is because they train wrong.
Like pussies.
With the protocol.
Right.
Ooh, we can say pussies,
Right.
right. People train like pussies when they push their carbs up.
Yeah.
So, if you want 80, 90 grams of carbs intra-workout, earn it.
You got to earn it, yeah.
I mean, it's funny, when I did my leg workout with Milos, I had 50 grams of carbs in my shake, and we did like 4 rotations of 9 exercises. He just didn't let me stop. And this was in Serbia. He got to the end of it, and he just said, Jesus, dude, after rotation 1, your carbs were gone. He said we could have done another double and a more, actually intra. And what it made me realize was that this is the thing when I train. I train, and when I am using the fuel intra-workout, I'm ensuring that fuel coming on board is growing my tissue.
That's right.
But I have to train to ensure that mechanism is going to work. I have to train hard enough to make sure that the scientific reason I'm putting the carbs in is actually being backed up by the intensity I'm training.
Right.
And that's why I love intra-workout carbs, but that's why I went to see Milos, because I needed him to take me to that place which I still haven't been to yet.
Right.
And honestly, Ben...
And there's nobody else who would take you there.
No, and I'm looking forward to seeing you hopefully when I come to Tampa, because when I watch you train, you talk about going there. And honest to God, I've not trained with anyone who will go where I will go with legs.
No.
And I don't mean to be arrogant.
No, it's true, man. I believe you. I believe you.
And that's because I've been taught by Milos how to train legs.
Yeah.
And once you've been taught by Milos how to train legs, you can't find anybody else that can do it with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. When I was aspiring to be a professional bodybuilder, was probably 2006 through 2008. Before I got my pro card in 2008, I would bet any amount of money, that there was no one that could keep up with me as far as effort. It got to the point where I would bring in one workout partner for the first hour and the second one for the second hour. And it's arrogant. No, that's the truth. And it's arrogant, but it's because I wasn't willing to accept anything less than the best legs in the industry. And that's what I wanted. And I got there, to what I believed were some pretty good legs in 2010, maybe 2011. And then everyone goes, man, you got to back off. You got to back off. You got to back off. So I did. And I don't know that it was the smartest thing I've ever done. But when I started to back off, I started to get knee pains. And my overall training started to suffer. I wasn't working as hard. My ability to generate intensity on legs wasn't the same because mentally you're just not in the same place. So I'm just starting to get back now to that point where I'm just like, fuck what everybody else says, man. If I want to get big legs, I'm going to get big legs. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to give it what I've got. But it's still not to where it was, 4 years ago. So hopefully by the time we get here, I'll be ready to roll.
Good. But do you know what? I stepped on stage at the weekend, and obviously with what I do and what you do, and I know you're in a completely different league with your physique, but I was not going to step on stage with all the chat I give on our social media feeds about body composition
right.
and
yeah.
symmetry and balance, and not be that guy
right.
that people go, holy crap, your conditioning was insane.
Right.
Now, yes, my conditioning was insane, and I tell you, I bet Milos will tell you this himself. The conditioning, the nutrition and the training come from the coach. The conditioning
comes from
is where you're prepared to go to yourself.
Right.
And I was literally crawling nearly from my office to the bike to do my cardio because I wasn't ready to tell him I needed a cheat meal.
Right.
And I didn't have, I think I did 9 weeks, and then I went and had a cheat meal.
Right.
And with the amount of carbs you have training twice a day, obviously, you're not on the floor. But I got up on stage, and do you know what people said to me this weekend? I know my legs aren't up to your level yet, but people said,
they look great.
Best legs on stage, best detail. And do you know what? If this is year 1 of me bringing this, I can't wait for year 2 and year 3.
Well, the detail was the best thing, man. Is some guys go on stage and have big legs, but don't have that Milos-like detail. And there's only that type of training that, the guy, you can tell you just train with balls, man. Like the guys who have that kind of detail in their legs know how to get after it when they're training legs. That's bottom line.
And do you know what? Milos won't mind me telling anybody this, but the one thing he's taught me is not just pain, but you do this on your videos, and probably no one can replicate it. When you talk about contracting your quads, we don't mean pushing your legs. We actually mean looking down. You often do this. I've seen you on some video. Today I train quads, legs, and I touch my legs until I know I can feel them absolutely contracted to the max.
Right.
And then I start pushing the weight.
Right.
And I'm meticulous. And this is why, with Milos's protocols, unless you do your heavy lifts, the loads I move sometimes aren't really
Very
heavy.
low. Yeah.
I can go in, not at all. But my ability to contract and find not just pain, I can almost bury my head down and know I'm contracting sartorius.
Right.
Know I'm contracting rec fem.
Right.
And that's the thing that I love. And when I get on a leg press with my leg high, I can almost separate which hamstring I'm wanting to push from.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think, when Milos sends me my program about the last week or last 2 weeks when we're talking about depleting, he said, I need you to, no, it's actually the 3rd week out. He said, when we train chest, I need you to squeeze the carbs in there. Push them in. And you know what? I've learned more about contracting muscle and an ability to teach people how to contract muscle. And I think it's the biggest thing that people still can't do.
Yeah.
They say they push, but they don't contract.
Right. I've got a little teaching tool for legs, and you'll get this, is the idea of, why I say this for everything, is engaging the working muscle first. So when I do legs, my favorite teaching tool for people, there's a video on the MI40 Nation site if you want to check it out, is just the bottom 3 inches of the range. So sit to the bottom of a squat, and as much as I want you to push into the floor as hard as you possibly can without moving. So I don't want I don't want the movement to start. I want you to shove your feet into the floor as hard as you possibly can, keeping your chest erect and all that stuff. And if you do that, and you teach your clients that, it's so simple, but they have no choice but to contract hard. So the idea is you're trying to remain stationary, so you're pushing against an immovable object, but pushing into the ground. The contraction that's the best way I've ever found to teach someone contraction. And then you just get them to try to push through that 3-inch range. And you get it, because like every time you get to the bottom of a squat or of a leg press or of a hack squat, that's what you're thinking about. That bottom 3 inches is the most important. But most people just don't get that, man. Like at the bottom of any rep, like if it's not that muscle working first, something else is. So you're not doing the work properly. And that's probably something I got from Milos too, I'm sure.
And do you know what? Like, this is the phrase that he says to me: the minute you feel you're coming out of pain, go back and find pain. And I remember, this was crazy. But you know what? I love training legs in pain.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't, oh man, I gotta get out. Like when I was training with him in Serbia, I was in a V squat machine facing outwards. And I got down and he just said, find pain. And I was like, I'm finding pain. And he goes, no, you found it. Find it deeper. And, I honestly do believe that's still, because you told me when we were in Tampa, that one of the biggest tips you can give me is when you train, imagine you're posing.
Yeah.
And when you're contracting the muscle, right? So I'm thinking to myself, when I stand on stage, yes, I might have detail in my legs, but because I train and contract,
it's easy.
When I stand on stage and contract, it's easy to make everything pop.
Yeah.
And I actually do think that there's a lot to be said for looking at people's legs, as I've always done over the years in terms of watching bodybuilding, and say, right, you can almost probably say, like you said earlier, how somebody trains.
Yeah.
Because you've got heavy-duty, dense legs that have got no separation and detail. And then you've got, the presentation of a full muscle with separation and lines and detail.
And you get guys who make comments about my glutes, and even if I'm not that lean, and the truth of the matter is that's called deadlifting 3 times a week for 10 years. That's what gives me glutes like that. People go, how do you get your glutes so detailed? Is it something like you do glute kickbacks or something? No, it's fucking 10 years of deadlifting at least 2 to 3 times a week. And that's the honest truth. My hip extension was tremendous. I deadlifted 800 pounds easily when I was 21, 22 years old, so it's just, that's what I did, man. I squatted and deadlifted, and that's where these legs came from. And now I'm learning how to contract and not having to use so much weight, but, and also staying injury free. So,
you're already there.
So, man, I want to know how you got in such great condition. What'd you do? Like, what was your nutrition like, and what was your cardio like? And I want to hear some details. I want to steal some tips.
I'll tell you. Okay, here we go. So the first thing for me, really talking to Milos, and I think he analysed it, and I actually asked you this question in Tampa, but I personally get on better with steady state cardio, and this is me, and the reason why we integrated this, it wasn't really at the beginning. We were training 5 days a week, and always prioritising one of the weaker body parts. So I would integrate, especially for me, trying to bring up my arms from shoulder surgery. I now know that how I need to train to bring up my arms, but from shoulder surgery, they were always a weak. They became a weak body part because of my instability in my shoulders.
Sure.
And ego lifting and non-contracting.
And all seeing in the magazines that you have to do barbell curls to build big biceps.
Exactly. And all the stuff that I was doing, and when I actually broke down the biomechanics and forgot reading magazines, I realized that there was a lot of things I needed to do differently. So the training protocols that we followed really had me doing legs once a week, because they were still they're kind of like more of an asset for me. Prioritizing arms a couple of times a week, and then as a nutrition protocol, I had cyclical diet. So I had high carbs on leg day, medium carbs on chest and back day, lower carbs on arm day, and then, which is why I like working with Milos, because this is how my diet was kind of set up I'm a 0 carb day on non-training days.
You do that in the off season as well, or just contest?
Yeah. No, I mean, in the off season, I tell you, February last year, I prepped for a shoot, which I kind of got wrong a little bit doing on my own. I got a little bit too depleted and was a little bit too gung ho with not doing my refeeds. But I got lean. I remember showing you the pictures in Tampa. I got lean, and it was a good attempt for me. But it was a really good solid platform to work on a really good rebound to come into the show. Right. So February, where I was at that point, I was doing high leg day. So I really have dieted. I started that prep November the 15th. 2013. So I have stuck to my diet since November 2013. So when we say I did my shoot in February and started to rebound, I didn't rebound with shit. I rebounded gradually bringing my calories up,
Right.
slowly pulling my cardio down until we started Milos' prep. And before I started Milos' prep, I was on high leg day, medium upper body, large body part upper day, and lower carb on arm day, and zero on non-training day. So Milos kind of put the plan together at the beginning of the prep, and it followed similar to what I was doing. He tweaked my intra carbs up a little bit more, pulled down fats, pulled down carbs a little bit more in one of my afternoon meals. And I have this kind of, as I talk to him, which why I get on so well with him, because I didn't really want to work with a prep coach that was suddenly going to make me have carbs at breakfast and, you know, carbs on non-training days, because,
Right.
you know, I've been in the industry 15 years and I've got my brain, and to prep for a show that means so much to me, I need to do something that I understand the science, not somebody that just says, well, this works, dude.
Right.
And I'd got to the point where I really loved low carb days. Meat for me in the morning, regardless of whether Charles, it came from Charles' kind of teachings. God, it works so well for me. I'm so focused, and you know what? I say regardless of Charles, what Charles says about why we have meat and nut breakfast is still bloody right. My brain function is fantastic. My energy is fantastic, and I always would have low carbs up to training. The only difference with some of the stuff Charles kind of taught me in the early days is that I really started to load carbs up intra-workout and then post.
Right.
So Milos's protocol in the prep was pretty similar to the setup that I had. The interesting thing that he kind of did was it went high, medium, low, high, medium, low, low. So it kind of bottomed me out a little bit towards the end of each week, and then I had a lift up. And what Milos did differently to what I did, I probably had 300 to 400 calorie difference between my high and medium and low days, but Milos likes a 5 or 6, and that higher higher calorie,
500 calories between the high and the medium, and then another 500 between the medium and the low.
Yeah, so there were fluctuations. I think it was 5 and then a 4.
It's big.
And then we go down. Then we drop right down to low calorie day, which could potentially be about 7.
Well,
but then it would go high, medium, low, high, medium, low, low, and then zero carb. So as obviously you can imagine, the early part of the prep is absolutely fine. And as you know yourself, from my perspective, if you give me a post-workout shake that tastes of banana and you give me intra-workout carbs, I'm not going to complain about no cheats for 10 weeks.
Right.
Because I work my ass off and then I just sit there with my eyes shut and drink banana. So that's my treat every single day. And as I got deeper into the prep, the training kind of changed a little bit. We started to then we're always prioritizing something, so we then started to prioritize a little bit more chest. So I had a chest day at the beginning of the week, a chest day towards the end of the week, and tagged on triceps at the end of those. So I was kind of working still on a higher, but my calories were not, believe it or not, at the point where I was losing much fat, and I was panicking, right? And I was 10 weeks, 9 weeks, 8 weeks, and I was still training full as a house, and I was putting size on, right? And I was calculating my calories, and I was thinking, I'm not actually in a point of calorie deficit. Right? I wasn't in a point of calorie deficit.
Right.
I was losing a bit of body fat, but what Milos had listened to me, and he'd obviously watched me in the past, and he knows my body. When I actually got down to the nuts and bolts of it, one of my friends came to see me 8 weeks out, and he said, dude, you're not going to be ready. And I said, I'm going to ring Milos and call it off. Actually, if Milos is listening, I didn't tell you that. But I got to the point where he said, you're not going to be ready. Now, I hold a lot of water because I drink a lot of water, and I'm a watery guy.
Me too.
So therefore, are you a watery guy?
Very much,
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So with intra-workout carbohydrate protocols, you've got to understand that you're not going to be the guy you're not going to be going to the beach on Thursday every week.
Right.
If I had 2 low days and then pulled water back a little bit, I'd dry out nicely.
Right.
And so the head games for me was realizing that Milos had me on high carbs, he had me on high water, and high intra-workout carbohydrates, and I looked like a sack of shit for, 5-6 weeks of the prep.
Yep.
But I was getting bigger, right? Now, when it came down to it, I spoke to Milos, and he actually said to me, it doesn't take you long to get lean, and you've got so much water. 7 weeks out, my diet started. properly. Now he got me in a prime position. I was bigger and fuller than I've ever been using his protocols.
Right.
7 weeks out, he gave me a 700 calorie hit, bang, every day, boom. And I read it. You might have read this recently. I think it was Jacob's article on bodybuilding.com. The research that says that when you're lean, when you're very lean, you can make smaller drops. I do this with my clients anyway.
Yep.
But you make smaller drops in calories to get the fat loss.
Yep.
But when you have more body fat, you can afford a 500 or 600 calorie drop 1 week and not lose any muscle tissue. Yeah.
Right.
Well, hey, he gave me a big calorie drop at the end of the next week. I was like, whoa, there's the abs.
Yeah.
And then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the physique just literally appeared.
I'll tell you.
It wasn't till the beginning. Go on.
I'll tell you a little secret about probably what have made you feel better when you're doing your prep. I don't change anything. I don't try to lose body fat until 6 weeks out for a contest for me. I actually keep my calories as high as possible. And the simple logic of it is, you know that you can either you can lose fat by decreasing your intake or increasing your output, right? Your caloric output. Yeah. So I don't decrease my caloric intake at all until 6 weeks, sometimes even 4 weeks out. I only try to burn fat through caloric expenditure. So I try to ramp up my training volume and my training frequency and push it as high as I can possibly go before I ever make any attempt to do cardio or do any type of caloric restriction. So by 4 and 6 weeks out, people look at me like, man, you better start dieting. And then 1 week later, as soon as you decide to make that slight drop, which for me is usually 500 to 600 calories, bam, everybody goes, oh shit, what did you do? And I go, don't worry about it. I got this shit figured out, man. I can look at a fat ass 4 weeks out and I'll still get rid. I'll be the most lean guy on stage. I mean, the idea is to try to get your like, we're bodybuilders, man. We're not endurance athletes. The idea is, I don't want to do 2 hours of cardio a day. I want to train as much as I possibly can. And if you put your calories too low too soon, you don't stand a chance. And Milos gets that, man, because he's done it. Milos has competed more than anyone in the history of the sport. He gets it, right?
And you know what? So obviously, I was in the gym. Honestly, like when you dieted down, right? I've got like double XL t-shirts and one thing and another, and I'm walking around and I'm thinking, these are still fitting,
right?
And I'm not. My waistline and my pants. They weren't even coming down. Like, it wasn't even loose.
Right.
And my chest was full, and people were like, God, you're looking big. And I was like, ugh. And anyway, it came down to it, in hindsight, I know water manipulation is a huge thing. And as we got closer and closer to the diet, what Milos started to do was pull carbohydrates a little bit more from intra. Therefore, as I pulled it down, I wasn't having a huge amount of water intra. I started to pull that down a little bit, so I started to dry a little bit more. And then he would increase training frequency. I'm quite adrenally sensitive, so training frequency got to the point of training twice a day, 5 days a week. I was doing 45 to 50 minutes of steady cardio in the morning. What happened 3 weeks out? 2 weeks out, I then started putting a little bit more hamstring work in on a 4th day. And then 1 week out, I'd say 1 week out before the depletion phase, I was training every day, twice a day.
7 days a week?
Morning. It was six. Six for the last bit. And do you know what? I just, for anybody listening that moans about twice a day training, I was the classic guy a few years ago that moaned about twice a day training. The priority for me was to win the show. So I put everything that I had. The guys that worked for me at the gym, they're an amazing bunch of guys. I think the world of them. I would come in, I'd do my cardio, I'd have 40 minutes sleep, I'd then eat, and then I'd go and train, and then I'd come back and probably collapse again for 25 minutes, have another sleep, and then I'd do 4 hours work. And in between I eat, and I'd do all my emails, and I'd run the web business and everything. Do you know what? You watch my Facebook. The day of my show, I put out 3 posts that were already planned and progressed and everything in. I didn't stop work until 3 days out.
Right.
And I got my training in. I trained twice a day. I did cardio, which was the 3rd session. I ate, I prepped, I slept. and I got it done, and it just was a routine, and it worked impeccably. But the thing about twice a day training that made the biggest difference, a I could eat more food, so the diet was pleasurable. So, there were days when I was training 3 weeks out. I thought, Jesus, I don't even feel hungry. I'm not drinking that much carbs
Right.
and post-workout carbs. The other thing was I was full as a house because there was no atrophy during my workouts from going low carb or zero fuel. My fat burning was done as the calorific restriction came in, and obviously the cardio in the fat burning, in the morning from a calorie expenditure perspective. So the actual workouts for me, I went full bore. Now I actually put the Road to the British videos up. I went ham. I went hard. 5 days out, 4 days out, I had energy. Some people I know that were literally flat on their face. So twice a day training for me, and the way that the nutrition was set up, just carried me home all the way to the end.
Right. I'll tell you one thing, man, is I do the same thing you do. I bury myself into the ground until the contest. You need to be, just a little word of advice is you have to take time off after the contest because you're so close to adrenal fatigue. Like, there's been years where I would try to go all year round and just train hard and train hard and train hard, and then after a couple of years, you just wake up and you go, what the hell have I done? Like, you get so tired and so depleted, so don't be afraid to take, a good amount of time of deload and rest period, man, because I know you're like me in work ethic where you want to work hard all the time, but I just took 4 months off the gym completely, and I haven't felt this good in my life, and it was such a hard thing to do. You're like, God, I'm going to lose all my muscle, I'm going to look like shit, which I did, but it comes back very easily. And mentally and physically, I've never felt better because I've been burning the candle at both ends for a couple of years, especially with a family and a business and trying to be a pro bodybuilder and all these things. So,
No, I do take that on board. And, it's funny, isn't it? Because the energy, the enthusiasm, and the drive, and the constant social media attention that we can now bring on ourselves just gets us to just keep going and going and going until you burn out.
right,
But this week, very interestingly, I'm training 4 days this week. I'm not going 100%. Cardio is pulled down to three 60-minute sessions. And I was going hell for leather leading up to it. And, I train today, and I'll listen to my body, and I'll sleep longer, and I'll get up later. And, I also think as well, Ben, this is a really important point. How I feel right now is a result, how good I feel right now is a result of the meticulous programming of the nutrition that Milos put in place.
sure,
Because you and I talk about this. Intra-workout carbohydrates facilitates recovery,
yeah,
right? So when you're having somebody taking in nothing and they are getting more and more depleted and running themselves into the ground, I've prepped myself before and had ulcers in my mouth 4 weeks out from adrenally absolutely buggered.
right,
I've had nothing.
yeah.
I have been absolutely fine all the way through. And I've trained hard, I've rested well, I've slept well. Obviously, the last couple of weeks, sleep was all over the place. But to be fair, intra-workout carbohydrates has done an amazing amount for my recovery all the way through this.
Well, the analogy I always use, Mark, is you can either dig a hole when you're working out or you can dig a trench. And at all costs, you want to avoid digging a trench for most people. But the truth of the matter is intra-workout carbs, for, like you said briefly earlier in the call, for 90% of the population of the world is useless because nobody ever works hard enough to earn it. They may earn 20 or 30 grams of carbs, and most people don't even do that. So when I'm making general recommendations to people, my suggestion is definitely don't do pre-workout carbs and maybe start 20 to 30 minutes into your workout, because by that point you've kind of dug a little bit of a hole, which is necessary because you want those catabolic hormones to be released, and then you put the carbs in. But for someone like yourself, who you're going to be killing it, like I would try to get as much inter-workout carbs in as possible. Like start at 50, work to 70, go to 100. I'd work up to 200 grams of carbs, depending what your body composition is doing. There's a tremendous benefit there, but for the average person, there isn't because they don't train that way.
And also, the other thing is, we know that bodybuilding at the end of the day is as much about the presentation of the physique as much as the fullness, and the fullness is glycogen at the same time as well. It's a stored glycogen. Yep. It's a full muscle, not a flat muscle. So, it's being used to our advantage in that respect. So,
Sure, and that full muscle, I mean, that's about how the way you train. You know, everybody's trying to train heavy and build big muscles by lifting, you know, singles and triples, and I just don't see the same type of muscular benefit. I mean, it's great to lift heavy, don't get me wrong. You got to be strong, you got to get that neurological benefit, but you got to get a degree of cell swelling and hyperemia and all that fun stuff is so important to having a round and aesthetic physique.
And I think that my programming now relies on a heavy lift, predict a lift earlier on in the workout that I use to gauge my strength level, but also train more of the fast twitch fibers that are an essential part of hypertrophy.
Yep.
So I'm not missing them out. I sometimes within an early part of say off season would break it down to a strength lift to facilitate part of a breakdown in a lift that I'm trying to improve. So it might be a rack pull as part of a dead, or some partial squats from a top range squat earlier on. And as I get further and further down, I probably won't go lower than a 6. For me, there's no need. And then as I get further into the workout, how I've got it nailed down now is that's where the hyperemia, that's where the lactic acid, that's where the cell swelling techniques really come into their own. And I've never seen growth like it by implementing all that in one. Because when we sat listening to Brad and Jacob, and I thought to myself, and this is my programming that I've ended up with, I personally don't see doing a month worth of strength training and a month worth of high reps and then a month worth of 8 to 10 as being beneficial to hypertrophy for bodybuilding.
Right.
From my perspective, I like combining the methodology within my program.
Man, I've done that for the last 7 years, and everyone goes, well, how do you periodize this stuff? And well, I did a call, I think my last call on the MI40 Nation VIP Inner Circle was exactly about program, like structuring a workout within, a single workout. You start off with something that's excitatory, like you say you're doing, which is something with a high neurological demand, whether it be bench press, deadlift, squat, something that's going to excite your nervous system, excite the motor neurons. Second to that, I always start in a shortened position. So if putting the muscle into, or overloading it in a shortened position. So if it's going to be chest, I try to get it really, really short so you get a really maximum contraction, which is also shown to massively increase the neurological recruitment benefits. And then from there, then we get into things like mechanical damage, hyperemia, cell swelling, the NOS sets, the drop sets, the overload principles. So it always start in the same way, and then what happens after that is completely dependent on variability, on ability to recover your current settings, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
So we're doing the same thing, different parts of the world.
And you know what? And one of the reasons why it was I'm not going to say the word I actually used, but it's a sod moment, I call it, when something comes on the internet and it says there is a course here and it's about these techniques. And that's why it was about a week before Jacob Wilson and Brad Schoenfeld and yourself were speaking in Tampa, and I went, I need to be there, because what these guys are going to be talking about is possibly going to help me nail down the way I have ended up writing my program.
Right.
And when I sat and listened to Brad talk and you talk and Jacob talk, and when we spent those couple of days everybody together, I was like, do you know what? It's funny that I've not picked up all the science research papers just to write the programming. But A, it makes sense, but B, there is also the research to back it up.
Right.
And that this is what I love. And when I wrote my own little 8-week muscle program, that's when I put everything together, because I also was happy that it was validated by science.
Right. I had a conversation with John Kiefer. He has John Kiefer, carb backloading.
Yep.
I had a conversation with him last week, or maybe it was earlier this week. No, it was last week. And about how I had learned to structure my own diet from trial and error over 12 years. And it literally ended up being carb backloading with a few minor differences. And I had never heard of John Kiefer or carb backloading. And I was in Australia putting on a hypertrophy camp, and somebody goes, dude, that's called carb backloading. And I go, what? What's carb backloading? Truthfully, and then we had a call, and he goes, yeah, so I came to all these conclusions from this research and this research and this research. And I go, oh, that's cool, because I came to it just from trial and error and realizing what I needed to do to be successful. And there was like such a parallel program. It was so, I mean, similar to what you're doing. You know, you're coming up with something based on years of trial and error, being an intelligent guy, looking at what works for you, and then you get someone who substantiated it with research.
Yeah, and I sat in the cab with Brad, and I said, you know, I'm not. There is going to be an element of lifting weights, which is because it works, you know. And the reason why I decided I needed to be in Tampa is because I'd listened to Brad talk twice in the UK, and he'd gone through his mechanisms of hypertrophy, and I thought there's going to be a few more little gems that are going to be in Tampa, but also it's not the gems, and this is the thing, you learn more on courses at lunch breaks than you often do in the seminars.
Well,
and if you're smart with your questioning, that's when you get the gems.
The truth is, like when I go up and do a seminar like that, especially at the University of Tampa, I don't pick the topic. So I don't get to choose what to speak about, and you guys get to hear what is basically I'm told that I have to speak about, or what they asked me to speak about, right? So like it was intra-set variables of hypertrophy or something like that. And that may not be what you want to learn about. But if you can ask me a specific question on break and go, hey, you know, what do you think about this, and what have you ever done with that? And same with Brad, that's where the true gems come, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? The gem came when I was in a cab with him after we finished the day.
Right.
And we'd been out for a meal. And do you know what? It was also probably one of the most humbling meals I've ever had, where myself, it was John Kiefer, isn't it? Jacob and his brother, Gabe, Brad Schoenfeld, and myself, and the guy from the Tampa Bucks, the nutritionist. They were sat around the table, and it was one of the meals of my life where I said nothing for 1 hour and listened.
Yep.
Because I listened and learned more than trying to interrupt in a conversation that I probably would have added no value to. But I listened, and you know what? That flight for me over, the reward on it is worth 10 times the price of the flight.
Sure.
And I think a lot of trainers still look at the cost of everything and go, "Oh, Jesus Christ, I can't do that." But you know, look 3 years down the line and what that small investment's actually made to your business. So, you know, it's a business reward, but you know what? At the same time, it's backed up a lot and made me a lot more confident with the way that I approach my programming, because I've been sat and listened to the guys who have actually done the research on it. So that's important.
Absolutely, man. Increases your confidence, and now you're more confident in delivering your message, right? You're like, hey, I know this is true because these guys are showing me that is true. And before you believed it was, but there's still that like, you know, hey, I'm just this guy who hasn't been doing it that long. I don't really know if I'm right. And then you get all these guys who are, you know, the authorities in the world substantiating what you say. So it definitely increases your confidence.
And that's massive. So yeah, it's come together and it's worked. And to be honest with you, I think Milos has a lot of trust in me with the programming, and even within the programming that I do with Milos, like I write all my programs, by the way, for the whole of my prep. So Milos knows that how he wanted me to train. So within my programming, I'd still do my heavy lift at the beginning, my neurological lift, and then I move away from squats about 6 weeks out, because I'm a very small-limbed guy, and as I lose body fat, I lose stability, especially with my injuries in the past. When I have more body fat, I'm more compact,
right, and
I feel a lot happier under the bar.
Right.
So it's not detrimental to me to pull squats out. It's actually more beneficial to me. I don't want an injury, but it's certainly not me going easier in the training session. But as I'm going through the workout, for example, I might do, for legs, for example, with a leg curl, into the pendulum squat with my feet forward, really working through the glutes and the hams. But the repetition ranges, I'm still doing them as a variable repetition ranges to hit the mechanisms of hypertrophy within the giant set.
Right. That's great. Yeah, of course.
So rather than just doing a giant set and hitting the different parts of the strength curve or different exercise variables, I'm actually making sure the mechanisms of hypertrophy are placed within the giant set. So I'm getting the double whammy rather than just the hyperemia effect and the contractile effect and the eccentric effect. I'm actually then getting the cell swelling effect later on into the giant set.
I think you're going to get the cell swelling no matter what you do, man. I don't think you have a choice.
No, true. But one of the things that I like to do, for example, would be, say, do high foot placement leg press for high reps to really, really drive the blood into the hammies.
Right.
But then place them under a stretch at the end with like a dumbbell RDL.
Right.
So I do like driving as much blood as I can to shorten the muscle, especially for legs, then creating a massive stretch at the end of the sets. Not only do I find that obviously the damage is fantastic, the stretch is fantastic, but I think people often underestimate how valuable things like RDLs and good mornings and dumbbells, the RDLs are in hamstring and glute development.
Oh, it's absolutely essential, man. I'm all about hip extension. The more you can get the hip extension involved, the better. Do you know if Milos is on the call? He's not writing in. Hopefully he said you were texting.
Well, and I do you know what? I'm talking as if he's listening.
Yeah.
It would be phenomenal to have us speak with him, but
I'm sure he'll get a chance to listen.
No, he will get a huge chance to listen. But the biggest thing with him as well is he knows, and this is the other thing, with the programming, doing online coaching with people is so difficult because you don't know how hard they're training. So if you give somebody 70 grams of carbs and they turn up and they're a little bit weak-minded and they just go, my leg sessions, my guys who are watching this call, listening to this call or watching this call now will know if I ever say, anybody want to do no legs, no. And to be honest, I did all my prep on my own. I paid my trainers in the last 2 weeks of my prep to train me. But do you know what? I can go into a nasty place on my own, and until I find somebody that can go there with me, then I'll keep prepping on my own.
Man, I think you might want to take a trip over here. Let's get after it. I'll tell you one thing about me, man, is I won't let anybody outwork me. I won't do that. Like, if you're ready, the way I beat people, man, is truthfully the way I beat people on leg workouts is I don't claim to be stronger than anybody, but I will outwork everyone in as far as rest periods. Everyone I've ever trained with so far is, if you're wanting to rest a minute, I'm going to rest 40 seconds. If you're wanting to rest 30 seconds, I'm going to do 20 seconds. That's just the way I beat everybody. And even though I'm a 300-pound plus bodybuilder, my endurance is usually fantastic. It hasn't been lately because I took so much time off, but when I get rolling, man, that's how I beat people. That's how I make them quit, right? I'm not going to say I'm going to out squat everybody and squat 800 pounds anymore or anything silly like that, or I'm not going to do, 10 plate hack squats per side. It's just, that doesn't build my legs anymore, but I will beat everyone I train with.
4 weeks.
Yeah?
4 weeks to build up your work capacity.
Yeah, man, don't worry. I won't quit. I won't quit. Yeah.
I think this is going to be a good session.
Yeah, we'll have to film it for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Sweet. Okay, man. Let's open up the floor to questions. We got a question here from Soren. If you only want to eat carbs post-workout, wouldn't 200 to 250 grams of carbs in one meal damage your insulin sensitivity long-term? Do you have an opinion on that?
I'm just reading the question again.
The answer... Go ahead, man. You go ahead.
Do we go now? I think it's still very, very specific to the level of depletion that you potentially have done within the workout. Mm-hmm. So the replenishment of glycogen is relative to the volume of the workout, itself. So 250 grams of carbs. Now, if I've gone absolutely hell for leather on a leg workout, I'd chew that up really, really fast. But if you've just gone through a leg workout of 12 to 14 sets and you've kind of given it 70%, then potentially you've got a risk of, a lot of, good potential there's 250, not even, doing any kind of good for you, and especially more potential to store as body fat.
Yeah, I completely agree. It depends on what you eat pre-workout. It depends on how hard you're working. So if you only want to eat carbs post-workout, like you wrote here in your comment, then 250 wouldn't necessarily be too much, especially if it's later in the day and you've been depleting all day. I don't think it's too much at all. Will it damage your insulin sensitivity? Not any more than eating 250 grams of carbs throughout the day spaced out would. So I think any time, no matter how hard you're training, a high carbohydrate diet will disrupt your insulin sensitivity long term. So that's why it's really important, as Mark says, to take your periods of really low carb, like Mark does his zero carb days. I think that's absolutely essential to both long-term health and short-term success. But I don't think it'll damage your insulin sensitivity any more than spacing it out would. Another question from Oliver. If you train twice a day, what should your macros look like? You want to run with that, Mark?
Okay. If you train twice a day, what should your macros look like? I probably look more on timing, because from my perspective, I'm still having protein with every single meal, so that's a given. In terms of spacing my macros out, I would be going protein and fats for meal one. I haven't had addition to the call, was having pre-workout carbohydrates during my prep, and I've never ever done that. And I got in great shape. I haven't noticed a huge difference in my performance between zero carb and carbs, personally. Now, I'm saying that because, a lot of people, I've been an advocate for 6 or 7 years of, zero carb pre-training, but do you know what? I've had carbs pre-training, 60 grams of carbs pre-training. I still train like a machine. It's worked well for me. So I'm still, I know there's research and I know the benefits of taking pre-workout protein and fats, especially for kind of from the neural perspective, if you're going to be hitting a big heavy lift. When I started my prep, I was still driving my lifts up and I was getting insanely strong for me. So it had a positive benefit, and there was no negative benefits there. So I'll say that for my during prep, I had protein and carbs, but most of the time I'd have protein and fats. Intra-workout, post-workout carbohydrates in a drink within say an hour, and then I had a post-workout meal, which was protein and carbs, and then in the afternoon I would have so that would be meal 3. Meal 4 would be protein and fats, and then pre-workout, which would just be more, creatine, glutamine, carnitine, citrulline mannate, and then I would train, and then post-training carb meal, and then pre-bed protein and fats. So in terms of spreading the macros out throughout the day, again, it's all carbohydrates around the workout, and then protein and fats, carbs around the workout, protein and fats earlier on in the day and last thing at night, and once in the afternoon.
I have a question for you.
So I wasn't mixing them up.
I have a question for you, Mark. When you say you're training really hard, what percentage of your workouts would you say is really meticulous form, and what percentage would you say is just all-out gusto and effort? So is there a point in your workouts where you disregard form and just get after it, or is it always an attempt to be really meticulous?
Do you know what? I'll tell you this. I have this weird thing about feeling that if the person I respected most in the industry was watching me train, what would he be saying to me right now? So I train with good form, and when people watch me, I train with good form. The only time I don't train with good form would be finishing off the odd set, like 3 or 4 reps. Mm-hmm. So I'll extend the set a little bit more with like lat pull down, great contraction, 10 reps. If I'm going for 12, I might have a little bit of a pull on the 11th and 12th. Mm-hmm. I do believe that there's more in the tank if you have a little bit of facilitation from the body. And the other thing is, say for example, I'm doing biceps curls, I can extend the set by doing eccentrics, but then force the concentric. So from a biceps curl perspective, if I've reached maximal contraction failure, but I want to extend the set with an eccentric, I'll give it a little bit of a force rep up, or swing the dumbbells up, and then an eccentric on the way down. So I would say, in the percentage of my workout, 80% bang on, 20% a little bit of.
Sure, agree completely, man. I think the more I've taken a period of time in my training for the last number of years that I've been so meticulous with my execution sometimes to the point that I didn't get that extra 20%. And I feel like my gains have suffered a little bit. So I think I'm getting back, or I know I'm getting back now to that point where you stay as tight as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can. And once you fatigue at that level, either 1, you're dropping the weight, or 2, you're extending the set with some type of cheat or force reps. So.
See, I'll say this as well, and this is credit to you. your videos and your education that's gone out there to everybody. And by the way, I'm starting RTS at the beginning of December.
You do to change your life, man. I'm telling you.
Which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, it's gonna change your life.
All the guys at my gym, we're all doing it. But I personally feel, especially when somebody has an underdeveloped muscle part, a body part, something that your videos are fantastic at doing. When you don't train with proper form, you miss contraction, you miss the actual part of the muscle that's the one that's going to give you the most shape.
Yep.
So if all you do is swing the weight and just lug the weight around right from day one, you're missing that contraction point, which is often the point which you look the best if you had that muscle.
Right.
Because it's not the lengthened end of the muscle where you look shit, it's the contractile end that you look shit.
Right.
So, get in the first part of the lift. And you did this on some of your videos, where and I actually employed this in my programming and do give you credit, but starting your back workouts off pretty light and getting that real deep contraction point, and then potentially moving in. If you did the hammer pull down, that hammer pull down for me is probably the least effective in contractile point and more heavy overloaded at the top end. Mm-hmm. So what I might do is I might do a seated row or a dumbbell row where I really work contractile, and then just load that one up and do heavy on the hammer pull down, because you're hitting different ends of the strength curve. But like you've said many times, people miss that contractile bit, which is why I think it's so important to put good technique within your programming.
I can show you how to make that exercise more effective for you, man. There's a certain aspect of understanding the strength curve and allowing the exercise to deload. I'll show you when you're here. Remind me if you want me to show you how to make that exercise get actually a better contraction. I've been playing with it for the last few months, and I think I figured it out.
Thank you.
Okay, what are some good tips on maximizing contraction? I can initiate with the working muscle, no problem, but I seem to lose peak contraction for a lot of muscle groups, particularly chest and biceps. So that tells me that's probably your two weak body parts. You go ahead, Mark. What are your ideas for maximizing contractions?
Do you know what? I'll tell you. I have both my shoulders have been absolutely screwed. Now on stage, the guy that beat me, he had a big chest. And this afternoon, I'm waiting for a phone call back from the judges. It did piss me off. And do you know what pissed me off more than anything is the fact that in my old gym and this gym, the one thing I didn't have, I had a lot of barbells and I had a lot of dumbbells. Now the problem is with me with unstable shoulder joints is I had no stability in my shoulders. Right. Now no matter, I've had my ligament shortened in the left shoulder and I've still got instability because of the AC rupture on the right. That I'm about to have prolotherapy in that, but that's another story. And what I actually started to do was go back to machines and really work on extending my chest more than I've ever done. And when I went to see Milos, one of the things he showed me more than anything, especially like in the guillotine press, was when you extend your chest, when you think you've extended your chest, go another inch. Because most people don't actually get the full stretch on the chest and they have an inability to contract. So what I did, I actually ended up dropping down to the 12.5 kg dumbbells. And in that arc that you talk a lot about, I was the guy in the gym doing the 12.5s with a chest that was growing, with the guys doing the 40s and 45s and they weren't growing. So now if you see me train chest, you'd think I'm a wimp. But my chest is growing. And
chest is one of those things that responds really well to giant sets. Yeah, it responds really well to giant sets. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me was, yes, giant sets has worked absolutely brilliantly. There are certain chest exercises that don't work very well for me from my injuries. But it's not just the fact that you think you're learning to contract. It's being able to contract for me, especially through the full range. Because you talk about bringing that full contractile point at the end.
Yep.
Well, most people seem to have it at the beginning, and then as they get halfway up, then they lose it. So when I say to people, I have an ability to contract, I'm like, what percentage of the actual range of movement do you have an ability to contract? Can you do 100% of the range contractile, or are you doing 20% of the range? And if we can get you up to 80%, you'll have development.
Sure. So I'm going to address this guy's question really quickly as well. The simplicity of it, his name is Alibaba, says the simplicity of it is spend more time in the contracted position where you're weak. So if you're weak at chest and biceps, take your body into that position where you're weak, engage the muscle, load it, and spend time there, and train your brain, your nervous system to squeeze harder in that position. So if it requires you having to do something with no weight at all, then that's what you have to do. And I had the same issue with my biceps. I was really weak in the short position, and I couldn't really get like a. And actually, this is something I actually learned from Joe Weider. Was when I went in to see Joe Weider in his office, he goes, "Well, show me your biceps," and he, kind of dug his finger into it, and he goes, "Squeeze it harder, harder, harder." I'm like, squeeze to the point where it's, hard as a rock and it's starting to cramp. And once I said to myself, oh, well, that's interesting, because you try to do it, but you never really spend a lot of time there. And once you become proficient at that for chest and for biceps, that body part will grow. Unequivocally, you'll get stronger there. It'll be better developed. Okay, we got a bunch of questions, so we'll go quick. If you don't have coconut oil and you work out 2 hours when waking up, what does this mean? Why don't you have coconut oil? If you don't, and you work out 2 hours when waking up, I don't know what that means. He's asking if you don't have coconut oil, what should you do? I'm guessing MCT oil. Buy some MCT oil, man. That may be a solution for you. Thoughts on occlusion training using lighter load to bring up a lagging body part? If I train arms twice a week, so we got another question that bump that up. Then last session of the week, I might add occlusion training. So what are your thoughts on occlusion training, Mark? Do you use that at all?
To be honest with you, I've used occlusion training with athletes from an injury perspective. I've tried it with myself, and I haven't personally seen a huge difference in hypertrophy for myself. The one thing I had tried with was actually included carbs more than anything, because I know you need a few tips on carb training. So yeah, but carbs for me is an area which I work hard on, and I don't believe any crap that carbs don't grow. You just don't train them right. You don't train them enough. Right. But I try occlusion training for carbs, and at the end of the day, we're looking at cell swelling and various different techniques. I think it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's not the only thing that's going to make me grow. So I haven't had it in my programming long enough to be able to actually do research to prove to myself that it was the single one factor that made my gains in a particular body part. So my jury's still out on its effectiveness at this stage, even though the research does state its effectiveness.
I'll tell you really briefly what my thought is if you're trying to increase frequency for a weak body part, which anyone who's trying to bring up a weak body part, frequency is the absolute answer. You need to train it more often. If you're trying to increase frequency for a weak body part, then occlusion is a really good tool because there's no muscle damage. So if you're constantly beating that muscle up and there's continuous muscle damage, you're always in a state of recovery. You're never going to grow. So try to incorporate things like concentric training, which is avoiding the eccentric, or at least not emphasizing the eccentric, or also occluding, are two exceptional ways to stimulate the muscle, initiate the protein synthesis process, drive more nutrients like hyperemia, increase cell swelling, but not inflict the mechanical damage. So you can actually increase the amount of frequency. So if you're training something 3 or 4 times a week, you may want to alternate between occlusion type of training to eliminate that muscular damage.
Nice.
This is an interesting question, man. You may have an opinion on this. Do you think BCAAs have a place pre-workout? They have been shown to decrease dopamine as they compete with tyrosine for transport. Thoughts on that?
Do I think they have a place pre-workout? Personally, no. I don't put them in pre-workout. They're intra-workout for me. I'm not aware of the dopamine decrease. So I'll be interested to see the reasoning and thoughts behind that. And then, to be fair as well, I think there's a lot of people using BCAAs and aminos intra-workout because they're not using a lot of carbohydrates or intra-workout fuel as well. So they're sparing muscle tissue. Right. I tend to have essential aminos in with my, I actually have Pepto Pro because I'm using a blended product for my intra-workout. So I personally couldn't comment on BCA's pre. You probably have some thoughts.
No, I don't use them either. I use essential aminos, and then BCA is usually toward the end of
Yeah,
or toward the middle part of the workout for me.
yeah.
Um, what should you do if you can't train twice a day to bring up a weak body part?
Okay, well, this is interesting because I've worked with a lot of people who can't train twice a day for a weak body
Hmm.
part. Easy. Pull back on a major body part and increase the training frequency on a weaker body part.
Yep.
So if you're going to be training 6 days a week, one of the things I do like is not necessarily doing full workouts on weak body parts, but doing tag on end of the session. So you don't necessarily, if you're going to do 18 sets for buys and tries or whatever, you can tag on 6 to 8, 2 or 3 times a week at the end of chest and back, and you're still getting the overall frequency within the
Yep.
week. So as far as I'm concerned, twice a day training is phenomenal. However, you still have 6 training sessions during the week or 5, depending on what you're doing, and you don't need to train every single body part with the intensity if it is actually overpowering other body parts. You can back off for a while.
Yeah, that's great, man. Another question about twice a day training. Charles Poliquin advised 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram. What about carbs and fat? Listen, man, really simply for you, twice a day training isn't actually going to be as calorically demanding as you may think. So, or maybe it's not going to be that much more calorically demanding than training once a day. You may only need an extra 400 calories or so. So that's it. I mean, you don't need to overthink it. Just make sure you're getting enough protein and aminos to recover, and add in an extra 400 calories. And you have to gauge it by how your body's recovering. If you're getting enough carbs, your workouts will be great. You feel energized. If you're not getting enough carbs, you need to bring it up. So I think realizing it's not that much, or it shouldn't be that much of a demand on your body, as long as you're not training for 2 hours each time, obviously. And if you're training twice a day, typically the workouts are 45 minutes to an hour. Get out. The idea there is to just increase the frequency. Another question, Mark. What would you
I think
do? What would you want to answer that one?
No, go on. Which one are you looking
Okay.
at?
I'm going right at the bottom one. What would a 5-day fat loss split look like to you if you wouldn't be able to train twice a day, including cardio? Well, you've given that in this in the call.
Yeah.
Perfect. The rest of these are just kind of comments about the dopamine stuff.
Can I add something in here, interestingly?
Yeah, man.
I'll add something in here about protein, Ben. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as well. Now, when I did my last prep, I was having 2.2 grams per kilo of, 2.2, what was I having? No, 2 grams per pound of protein in my last prep. Now, always have been advised very, very, very categorically to have higher protein around that sort of level. Now, very interestingly, when I did my last prep, as I started to pull my calories down, the one thing that I was left with protein, and I wasn't left with much else. I experimented. I remember having a Skype call with John Meadows, and I spoke to him about it, and I said, from your perspective, do you see protein needing to be that high? I said, because I've readjusted my calories, my macronutrients, and I pulled my protein down to 1.25
Per kilo.
I then got more macronutrients per pound.
Per pound.
I then pulled it down from 2 per pound to 1.25 during prep.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me a lot more macros from protein and fat to add back into my diet to fuel my training, right? I lost 0 muscle tissue. I increased my training hugely. And it was an experiment I did on myself. And my gut reduced. Any digestive issues I had reduced massively. And I've been just interested to see your thoughts and experiences on, especially from a bodybuilding perspective, roughly protein intake per pound, because I noticed very interestingly that no muscle tissue was lost. And I remember when I was talking to John and he said that he remembers speaking to Eric Serrano and saying that his athletes were struggling with constipation at one point, and it was very much down to the fact that the protein was that high, they were struggling to digest it, but at the same time, even though it was reduced, they didn't have any muscle tissue loss.
I'll tell you what, man, old habits die hard, right? It's the idea that we're told that protein is muscle sparing, and the more you have, the more muscle you're going to maintain, and it's hard to get over that, and that's a huge problem in our industry with a lot of things. I won't say I never, but I guess I really do believe that once your protein gets to a certain point, it doesn't need to go any higher, and your macros need to come from somewhere. So going into some massive caloric deficit from no carbs and no fats just doesn't make sense. And trying to eat all protein, I've done it, man. I've been guilty of it, just because I like to make myself suffer when I'm dieting. But you realize that any less than 30% carbs, especially for a trained athlete, it's probably silly. It's at some level. I've been down probably close to 5 or 10% and not doing any fats at the same time. I was like 80% protein. But just because you're like, well, I like to make myself suffer, and I did it for the Olympia actually in 2012, and I looked like shit because I was so over dieted, so over depleted. My cortisol was through the roof. My body just said, I'm not responding anymore. But I had the mentality of, it's the Olympia, man. Like, I got to be so shredded and so much better than I've ever been. I'm just going to make myself suffer. And I was doing 3 workouts a day and eating no carbs, and it's just stupid. But the mentality is, well, if I can hurt more, then, I'll look better. But it just didn't work. So I've learned my lesson since. Here's a question for you, Mark. What were your macros on high versus low day during prep? Do you have examples of numbers? We're only going to take one more question because it's been an hour and a half, so we got to go. It's been 90 minutes.
Okay, so my macros on high versus low days. Well, I had 3 days. At one point, I was having 4 different days. I can't actually give you from a calorie perspective because I've not got it in front of me. But I would say on average, training days 6, 190 to 200 carbs on medium days. A little bit more, probably 250 on leg days. And then on non-training days, it was 0. And that was when it was like a 60-40 diet.
How much of that was during your workout?
I would have pre-workout in the morning, 50 grams of oats. Intra, 40. Post, 20. Post-training meal, 75. And then obviously would go, and interesting what you said in the comment before, in the evening, depending as I was coming closer to the prep, this is what made it interesting. Milos would keep carbs in to the body part that I needed to prioritize, and would slowly pull the carbs from the body parts that were fine. So when I did back, I'd probably have less carbs, but at any time I was training the weaker body parts, the carbs were always there.
Yeah, and that's true from a performance aspect, but also from a psychological perspective for me, man. I know if I have a weak body part, let's say I'm training my arms or my back, and I don't feel I have any carbs or no energy, I just know you're going in there, you're like, fuck, I just don't want to do this. My workout's going to be shit. So just having a little bit of carbs per workout helps you psychologically. I say do it. It's so important, man. Psychology is so important in what we do,
Yeah, no, and you know what? Even running into the last couple of weeks, I had a double leg day on Tuesdays with no carbs, and the way that we trained, that was tough.
Yeah.
So we did the depletion phase. I actually trained just out of interest out of everybody else. People at the show were always intrigued. Like, when did you stop training? I competed on Sunday and stopped training on Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
So I basically did Friday. I did a full body pump workout. Started my carb load, and then middle of the way through the carb load on Friday afternoon, I did a pump session. And then Saturday I ate 0 training, Sunday show. And do you know what?
Saturday 8-0, did you say?
No. Saturday I didn't train.
Okay.
But the interesting thing that I learned more than anything, and do you know what? This isn't me only just finding this out. I've known it for a little while, but it's a nugget for people. You don't if you train the way that we train, you aren't you risk catabolism by thinking you're depleting on zero carbs. So for me, I actually in my depletion phase, I had 130 grams of carbs to deplete with. So a lot of people contact me and say, "Oh, I started my depletion phase 6 days out. I've done zero carbs for 5 days now. I've had 600 grams of carbs
Your
today,
body to hold
and
the
I've lost
glycogen.
5 pounds." Yeah, or they completely just bottom out and drop all their weight. So some people can't fill up, and then other people are just too depleted that a 2 days worth of carb loading is not going to do anything.
One last question for me, just is because of my curiosity. How much carb did you actually eat Friday and Saturday for your load? I know what I did. I'll tell you what I did. I think I told you.
Okay, I'll tell you because Milos would want me to know. This prep, I did 1,000 on Friday, and then Saturday. I did 1,000 on Friday, and then Saturday. Interestingly, because I was fuller this show, I had 750. Now the interesting thing was, the last show I did, the qualifier, I was a lot more depleted, and I had near enough 1,000 on the Friday. On the Saturday, I got to my hotel after having probably 800 all day, and Milos sent me off for burger and chips. And I was sat in TJ Fridays crapping myself, thinking I've never had burger and chips, and I had a big burger and chips and woke up absolutely dry and shredded in the morning. And that was a 2,000 grams over 2 days. And this one again, I think was about 1,900.
So I don't know if I told you on the Facebook message I sent you, but I'd never done anything like this before in my life. Wednesday, when I did the Milos load, Wednesday was 1,250. Thursday was 1,500 because I was still flat. And Friday, I think it was before noon, it might have been before 2 p.m., was another 1,000. And then credit. So, and by that point, I was 293 the day before I stepped on stage. And I was so full that I would literally move and I would get a pump. It was crazy. And then we obviously pulled water and I ended up looking great. I wasn't shredded enough to begin with, but I was big. And I've never bothered or never been willing to try that load again without Milos standing there watching me because nobody else has that eye. But man, if I could do that again, the difference is just unbelievable, man. To look full and shredded, and you got to be in great shape to begin with. That doesn't work.
I'll tell you this: on the day of the show, the guy who won is an up and coming guy, and it was a good battle. But there was one of the pros in the backstage, and he said, "You know what? You went up on stage, and you were the only one out of every single guy who grew through judgment."
Right, yeah.
I was filling up, my shoulders were popping, my chest was popping, my legs were just growing, and I actually thought I was the smallest guy on stage.
Right.
I've looked back at the pictures and I was like, is that me?
Right.
So everything that's in my system over the last 2 days prior, and obviously, it wasn't anywhere near as big as you, but by Christ, I grew on stage, stood there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People told me. So credit to Milos, the guys are, not only as a coach, he's become a huge mentor for me because, one of the biggest things for me is I believe in myself. And do you know what? I've set my stall, and I'll tell you when I come and see you face to face on what I want to achieve in bodybuilding. And I do believe that with that man by my side, I'll achieve it. So,
I agree, man.
He's been an amazing mentor, an amazing friend, and watch this space, everybody, because I'm going to bring it next year, and I can't wait. So
good, man. And if there's anything I can do along the way, I'd be happy to help.
And I will call on that.
Especially kicking your ass in the gym.
I cannot wait.
Mark, it's a pleasure, mate. Thank you so much, and hopefully everybody's enjoyed the call. Sorry about the mishap at the beginning of the call, guys. We had 15,000 people come to the site at the same time, and it crashed. So we ended up getting it done. Hopefully the recording is good, and we can send it out to everybody. So, thanks, everybody, and Mark especially, man. Hopefully we do another call. For those of you that don't know, on the MI40 Nation site, there's 3 recent articles Mark has done on contest prep which is the first one was mindset, the second one is nutrition, the third one is training, all in how to transform your body. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll talk soon.